Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Jeff Rudat. Jeff is somebody who truly embodies the intersection of retail, artistry, and data science. He spent his entire career in what he calls as the retail Rosetta Stone, which I love. I really want to get into that with you. Translating between the language of business needs and the capabilities of technology, which are very different languages, by the way. And he's got over 2 decades of driving hundreds of million in revenue for giants such as Bloomingdale's, Wood Taylor, and other luxury apparel brands. And he's one of these sort of rare executives that C-suite folks, call when they say there has to be a more intelligent, better way to do this. And what really, I've known Jeff for a while, what makes him unique is his ability to build bridges across, inevitably departmental silos. They happen. And he's not just a planner or a technologist, he's really a true transformation architect who empowers cross-functional teams to achieve results that they themselves never really thought possible. It's tough stuff. He's got a superpower, I think, and that lies in turning complex analytics and pretty wonky stuff into actionable insights. Everything from ERP implementation to optimizing inventory allocation, performance frameworks, and so on. He consistently delivers awesome results. He's the founder of Rudat Consulting, where he continues to guide retail companies through the most challenging transformations, but always with the philosophy that technology should empower human beings and human expertise, but not replace it. Above all, Jeff is an omni-channel historian, and there's a lot of really valuable insights there. And a big proponent of the idea that retail will always be this blend of art and science. Jeff, welcome. Would you like to tell the ladies and gentlemen a bit more about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tim. And as you mentioned, retail's always been a mix of art and science. I started on the art side in a buying program at Lord & Taylor and found that I gravitated more towards the analytical piece. And at that point, planning was starting to take on a life of its own. So two sides of the same coin, the buying and planning, the art and the science. And then as my career progressed, we started adding technology and to automate things the ways we were doing things. And I found that I really gravitated towards that also, and was often one of those subject matter experts that was brought in as we rolled out new systems to represent the needs of the business to the people developing and proposing the solutions. And what I tell people kind of tongue in cheek is that I'm bilingual. I'm fluent in the language of retail and conversant in the language of technology. And back to you, the Rosetta Stone example, much like the Rosetta Stone in Egypt had, both hieroglyphics and ancient Greek on it, the same message in two languages, so you could translate back and forth. I can be that person in the room who makes sure that what the merchants and the business team are saying and what the technical team is saying, they are connecting with each other firmly and not just thinking because they're saying the same words, not realizing they may be speaking a different language or coming from different contexts, different positions, and not really connecting. So avoiding that, have excess iteration by making sure that people are on board and we know what success looks like and we know what we're trying to solve for. Many times solutions can come in as a solution looking for a problem, but you really want to have a concrete business problem and then find the solution that best works for your business. One of the most dangerous words or phrases you can use when getting a new solution, it's worked for companies like yours. Well, there are no companies exactly like mine because we have a unique relationship with our customer, our tech stack, our people, our processes, etc. And what I really like doing is being that bridge and really, creating that connection, and not just creating the connection for the business solution and the technology and to the business problem, but then taking people on that change management journey. Because as you well know, it's not enough just to bring a new solution in because inertia is so powerful that people are often afraid of doing things differently. So looking at the process map, how are we doing things today? What are our objectives? How is that going to change going forward? And then creating that journey, that map, to take people on that journey together to really expose them to, listen, we're still solving for the same things. Hopefully what we're doing in this is making it more automated. And I'm a big fan of the expression that you said earlier, a both and. It's not either or. It's not either technology or people. It's technology and people. So what I can tell you as a VP of planning, my team's probably spent 60% of their time moving data from one spreadsheet, one system to another using Excel or other tools. Maybe 25% analyzing it, and then 15% taking action. What we can do with a lot more tools today is hopefully turn that on its head to allow the repetitive and deeper analysis be done by systems surfacing exception reports and things that the team can really use their experience and their expertise to develop and to drive for opportunities and to reduce risks. So, I think with the advent of all these new technologies with AI and, whether it be agentic AI or the LLMs and customer service bots and things like that, there's a lot of things going out there, and we really need to see how we're going to anchor this to our business solution. The difference now with solutions happening in these last few years is the speed of change. It's really accelerating on an exponential level. And what people really need to know is it used to be, well, we'll have time to catch up. Let's see what other people are doing. Let them take the risks and we'll catch up to them. But right now that gap may become wider than you think it can become more quickly. So it's very imperative for companies to at least dip their toe in and to sample the solutions available and get some small wins to both expose their company to these new technologies and to help understand how their processes can change to benefit it. From a personalization point of view, I think that's the real win with technology these days in retail is how do we get a better, stronger relationship to our customers through personalization.
You mentioned a few really interesting things. Look, you've got the potential for hyperbolic change and hyperbolic, right? It's not just agrarian to industrial. The potential for this is way bigger than that. But you hit 3 or 4 times in that same statement that it's the people. And it's like, if your management isn't working with the teams, like sort of all the way down, and they're not really encouraging these, the folks really in the front lines of the business to immerse themselves in this subject matter of Gen AI and machine learning and this and that. Because if you don't, then there will be sort of negative short-term, adverse impacts on, person's career. But I think for the folks that are embracing this, to your point, instead of spending whatever it is, % of the time being a data janitor, moving stuff from one pocket to the other, it will allow people that are really actually interested in sort of moving their careers along to do much more thoughtful and intelligent things. I'm just curious, sort of be honest with you, I've hit all kinds of challenges, across the last 3 years, even as something as simple as Adobe Firefly, right? Where, I've been privileged of looking at for some creative teams. They'll all tell you they want automation and this and that. They want speed and what have you. But when you actually give it to some of them, not all of them, some of them just, boom, give it to me and I want to go run with it. I want to learn everything there is about it. But you inevitably wind up with some folks that, they said they wanted it, but not really, because you've got some folks that are holding on to some of these very repetitive tasks for dear life because there's this reticence. And if you could just talk a little bit about the realizing, I think, the success and the opportunity of this is really going to be in getting your people to not be afraid of these things and really embrace them.
Exactly. And as human beings, we are twice as sensitive to negative consequences as we are to positive consequences. That's one of my subspecialties is behavioral analytics and behavioral economics, understand what makes us tick, because where software is advancing so much more quickly than our mental models and our feelings. One of my favorite sayings I've seen recently is we are feeling people who think, we're not necessarily thinking people who feel. So much happens subconsciously that you have to take into account people's emotions, people's natural fears, which means having clear communication and taking them on the journey, meeting people where they are first. And people are in different stages of their acceptance of it. And inertia is very powerful because I know this. I know how to do my job with this. Now you're introducing something that may make me feel unsecure, unsure about how to do this. Been through changes in previous companies where I've consulted with people of all different skill levels. And when you come and present them with a genuine, say, we're going to take this journey together. I understand the steps you've done in the past. I understand your fear, and give them one-on-one coaching and hold their hand and show them that there is nothing to fear here. It's just a different way to get to the same destination, hopefully more quickly and more powerfully, and one that will empower you more, because it's not just a quicker way to get it, but you're really changing the mix of time of what people are doing, and hopefully you're giving them more value at a task where they feel that they are contributing to the business using their mind, not just their fingers and the keyboard. forward. However, that takes an assessment of how are things going to change. You can't just kind of gloss it over and say, well, there's going to be there may be some restructuring of this with people doing different jobs. We don't know yet. There's going to be an impact. People are afraid that AI is going to take my job, and the prevailing kind of conventional wisdom is, well, AI probably won't take your job by itself, but somebody who knows how to use AI in combination with it could threaten your job. So being open and being aware, and there are plenty of free courses out there on places like Coursera, et cetera, where you can kind of expose yourself to it. But it's really saying, listen, we think there's a better way that we can do this, and we can not only do it more quickly, but we can give you more job satisfaction by letting you use your higher and better skills to do this. What I'm going to say, having said that, one of the big differentiators comes down to no matter what systems you're implementing, how good is your data? As old as spreadsheets and computers, garbage in, garbage out is still the case. So just because we've got a very fast engine, if you're not putting the right fuel in there, it's not going to perform well. So you've got to make sure that you've got good, solid data. So as you're looking at your data cases and your rollout cases, where do I have the most confidence in my data that I want to make sure that we're succeeding initially? This kind of there was a book now, I think it was called like the paradox of data. The more data you have, the harder it is to look at, especially with unstructured data. But how do you find that high quality data and then use that and find a use case where you can really get into it and dig deep into it and show people that this process works? There was a book that came out almost maybe 5-6 years ago called Humachine, Humachine. By the title, you might think it's a book about a cyborg or something like that, but it's really about the new corporation using the idea from Garry Kasparov, who was a chess grandmaster, but beaten by Deep Blue by a machine. And they call it, Kasparov's equation is that a human plus a computer plus strong processes are going to be better than a strong human and a strong computer without the strong processes. So it's the human and the computer and the processes, and you can't discount the processes because how are those people going to work together? So it goes back to that both and one of those ands is the processes also. So understanding that, and that's why it's important to get people involved from the beginning at all levels through change transformation, because we really need to understand what people are doing today, not just what we think they're doing, but how are they doing it today? How is their job cascading and going into the current processes, and how will that change? And it's important to do that, that whole mapping and that whole examination to make sure that we're covering all the bases and that we'll continue to operate and drive our key metrics after this new implementation.
One of the most important prescient things you said at the top of this was, what does success look like when whatever engagement project is done? I had a Rock'em Sock'em hour with Pete Shea from Salvated, which is a dev shop, awesome dev shop. Every one of their guys, the way they do it is full stack. So they don't have to go get, a guy for this guy. They work backwards, like religiously. I've worked with them. They work backwards from what does this look like when we're done? When we're done, we're going to turn the keys over to you and we all go on our merry way. What does that look like? I think what you're saying is, when you're mentioning the process, which is like the glue, I think, between the human side and the machine side, if you're well defining from Jump Street, okay, I want this, here's what I want this to look like when it's over. And by the way, when an engagement and, you're close to this, look, I'll deliver you X, Y, Z deliverables, but based on the industry that you're in, the categories or whatever, I'll deliver this for you. But if I'm doing this properly, I'm leaving nodes and windows and doors open to things that I know you're also going to need based on, whatever category that is in the out 6, 10, 12, 24 months. I just wonder, you and I have both been doing this a long time, the importance of basically before you get going, okay, these are the 3 things, I want to know what it's 3, that are going to be true when this project is over, and just the importance of that.
I'd say the most important thing, and you alluded to this earlier, is what does success look like? What will be the definition of when this happens? This will be the outcome that we want and the flexibility, the new opportunities we have. So let's be very clear on that. Okay, then let's talk about what's the gap between where we are now in our systems and what success looks like going forward. What's not accomplished in our current systems, and what new systems and processes can accomplish that. And then the third thing is, so we're starting with the end in mind. Here's what success looks like at the end. Here's the gap. But then you have to go and meet people where they are today to understand both the technological lift and the people lift in terms of the journey, the mindset, the processes, etc. So always starting with that end in mind and what does success look like. And you could have flexibility there. You don't want to hardwire it to the point where you can have, flexibility to change parameters, etc. But part of that, what does success look like, would involve having that flexibility, having those things, having maybe interconnectedness where that same data could be shared by other people, etc. So defining the end, the gap, the beginning part, and then mapping out that change journey, both from a technical point of view and, as importantly, from a people and process point of view.
Do you ever, when you're doing that, you say, look, these are the three, four, five, whatever things that we're going to deliver. Do you ever get out in front of it and say, these are the 5 things we're not doing? They're fan favorites. And if, whatever, the pet projects, whatever you want to call them. But if you did them like flawlessly, like completely flawlessly, they'll be rounding errors to the overall business. You ever get out in front of it and say, let's just hold hands now before we start. These are the 5 things we're not doing that are not in scope of this.
The way I approach that is I'd listen. I mean, when we were actually still meeting more in person, as we are again, and handing out business cards, my business card has a saying on it, and it's on my LinkedIn page also. My consulting starts with the right questions answered. So I ask, okay, what does success look like? What are be the metrics that you're going to do for that? Now, is the bang worth a buck? So is it nice to have, is a need to have? So I wouldn't dismiss out of hand necessarily a request. I'd say, well, okay, that's what success looks like. Why do you need that? How's that going to help you connect with your customer? What's the business objective for that? What's the anticipated payback? And then maybe we rank the things based on the anticipated payback. Maybe there's something that's very important to one user group that's not as important to everybody else, but it can be done in parallel. So you want to make sure that you get everyone on board and clearly understand both what does success look like in a abstract way and a functional way, but then also in a financial way. And how is it going to position us for the future? It's not just what does success look like now, but how are these platforms and how are these changes going to position ourselves to better execute our core values and our connection with our customer? Because no matter what the system is, whether it be a marketing system, a logistics system, a planning, the system is all, at the end of the day, is there to serve the needs, what Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School called the jobs to be done of the customer. And customers, right, and we all know over the last several years how much customer acquisition cost has skyrocketed, especially online. And it's really so much more important now to get a better share of wallet, a bigger share of wallet from your existing customers, or even better, to acquire customers by being what Steve Dennis called remarkable, letting people naturally remark on your brand to other people, which can bring new customers in at a very little or no acquisition cost. So figuring out and getting close to those customers is the key. What's that?
Well, you're seeing that now in Reddit, right? So like what I mean by that is this. You have Google now. By the way, the whole Google search algorithm, it's on its head. We all know that. AIO, AI Overview, Gemini. So that's going to become eventually a whole monetization stream of that.
Yep.
You're going to have to SEO into that too. You've got Google is now basically, to your point with that remarking thing, they're leaning a lot of search engine results into Reddit, into subreddits. And so they're leaning, from an organic perspective, they're doing exactly that. And they're saying, you know what, there's so much noise out there. But we know that Reddit has probably the best shot at being an organic resource for real boots on the ground people. And they're really, really pivoting hard into that in the results.
And one other place I'm seeing that, there was a recent article saying, and it was kind of hyperbolic, saying, forget optimizing for SEO, optimize for LLMs. And the headline caught my attention, but the reality is you have to meet people where they are. Many people are starting to use these ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, et cetera, and say, where can I find the best ski jacket for these conditions? So the idea is, you're not just looking for a ski jacket and then trying to go down yourself. You're getting a recommendation. So it changes the way that you might talk about your product. And the encouragement is for companies to put more descriptive, more storytelling around their product. So as LLMs become more of a use of a customer entry point to a purchase, much like in some ways, again, the shortest distance is between the customer's impulse to buy and their ability to buy. TikTok is doing a great job on that now with live shopping, especially for Gen Z, being able to see something and buy it, and they have now a price match on it to make it even less of a barrier to hit that buy button. So if somebody is using these LLMs, which are right now, if you compare the LLMs to the Google search, they're much more energy intensive, but that's what people are doing no matter what. You have to meet customers where they are. If that's where they're going to be, so how do you represent your brand there?
That's very, very true. You had tremendous experience, implementing and integrating a lot of AI, ML tools over the last few years. How do you avoid you get bright, shiny object syndrome, right? So a lot of this stuff is just, it's sizzly, but it's not, the technology's not really there yet. And, you said something about Harvard, sort of professors and lectures and
Yes.
this and that. I'm assuming you remember New Coke. I remember New Coke.
Yep.
We were kids. Sergio Zyman was one of my patron saints of what we do, was the CMO of Coke at the time. And he was at Harvard, Yale, one of these really fancy places.
Hmm.
And he's lecturing. And one of the kids asks him, Mr. Zyman, you're a marketing legend and this and that. How do you define marketing? And the kid was expecting some big doctoral thesis answer out of him.
Hmm.
And Zyman said, look, marketing to me is really, I'm a simple guy. It's as simple as this. And good marketing is selling more stuff to more people more often for more money. It's that simple. And to me, it still applies to what we do today. And if
Hmm.
you've got some of these bright, shiny objects that they're cool, but again, they're not ready for prime time. They're not really going to get you. You should avoid them, but you shouldn't really plan your P&L around them either. I just wonder, in your sort of journey, how do you kind of, how do you sort of address that with your teams?
I think it comes back to almost a discussion of style versus substance. One quote I'm looking at right now that I saw is saying, investing in flashy solutions without matching business processes is a setup for failure. So it's catching your attention, but what's it going to do to your business? And things have a lot of potential. And again, I come back to a company say, well, this worked for a company like yours, but it's going to work for you. So how does that translate into implementation? What's it going to mean for our customer? What are our guiding principles? How is it going to get us closer to that? So again, and it kind of reminds me of the Gartner hype cycle. If you remember a few years ago about the
Yeah,
metaverse
very well.
and the whole thing about then we had through COVID and why would anyone ever shop in a physical store again? Well, they can go to metaverse, they can shop online, but there's a difference in my mind between
Yeah.
browsing and shopping. I consider Amazon to be the Google for buying. If you want to buy something and you know what it is, that buying versus shopping, if you want to buy something, go to Amazon. If you want to shop and browse, there's not a really good way to do that yet, and that was what the metaverse was going to be. Well, guess what? You can do that in physical stores too, and physical stores also offer a great environment to interact with the brand, a great environment in sized businesses to understand what your size is and get a comfortability with that, so you can order with confidence online. As you and I know, so many companies suffered during the last several fourth quarters with what we call bracketing, where customers weren't sure of their size, so they buy the size they are, one up and one down. Well, if you're an e-commerce brand, now you've got 3 items of the same item going out. 2 are coming back. Okay, those 2 come back. Are you going to be able to resell those 2 because they're not in pristine packages? And if you're a pure play e-commerce brand, your customer is expecting a pristine item coming from you. However, if you're an
Underwear,
omni-channel brand, what's
right?
that?
Like underwear.
Yeah,
What you can't resell that. I mean, you're kind of
right.
stuck with it.
But even a T-shirt or a dress or something else that's not pristinely packaged. But if you're an omnichannel retailer, those you can go hang on a rack in a store and resell or use to fill an online order for something else. So the idea of one inventory available to everyone, but understanding where's the customer going to meet you. And it's the idea of, we used to have, when I was at Macy's and Bloomingdale's back in the 2010s or so, and we had a separate buying and planning organization for the e-commerce business and for the stores business. Clear indications from our customer that the customer is shopping the brand, not the channel. So we really had to make sure that how do we integrate that and speak to the customer in unified voice and have one source of inventory available for everybody. If the customer is in a store in New York and we're out of her size and color, we can get it for her from a store in Minneapolis. If the customer is an e-commerce customer on the West Coast, most of our fulfillment facilities are on the East Coast, maybe we can fulfill it from them from a West Coast store, and making your inventory more profitable, which is another topic I'm sure we'll get into, because
You
inventory
preach
can be
this.
both
I
your
mean,
biggest risks.
yeah. Yeah, no, you preach this, that return on inventory is the hidden, one of a few, but probably the biggest hidden
Yeah.
profit floor in e-com. Get into that a little bit if you would. I mean, it's really not sexy to talk about optimizing inventory and all that. And it's not going to make a board deck. He's not going to be drilling you on some of these questions and QBRs and whatever. But you don't have really robust underpinnings of inventory allocation
Mhm.
as an omnichannel retailer, and to say nothing of all the other channels, Amazon, Walmart, Target, what have you.
Mhm.
you're in deep trouble because
Absolutely.
nobody, by the way, is carrying, mountains of inventory. There's not enough money in the world today to keep doing that. You can't
Right.
do it. So just talk a little, if you could, about your journey there.
Sure. One analogy I saw about that was called, we're all familiar with just-in-time inventory, but a lot of retailers used to kind of go with the approach of just in case. I don't want to leave a sale on the table, so I want to have enough inventory to satisfy all my sales. Well, that could wind up with you having excess inventory that you're marking down, jobbing out, or putting away and pulling back next season. So one of the other things I've seen people saying, well, your GMROI, your gross margin return on inventory, should include a cost for your inventory carrying cost of things that's not selling. So kind of look at your net GMROI versus your gross GMROI. And with inventory, it can be your greatest asset when it's selling through your greatest liability. Having not as robust inventory, it may be creating some fear of missing out or some inspiration to action that may not be there if I wait too long. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And some retailers discovered that by necessity during the pandemic. So maybe writing with a little bit lighter pen or a little bit smaller dropper in terms of what you're doing, but having a robust assortment that if you sell out of one, there's other options still for the customer. And the newest trends now are trying to get more pre-reads on that from customers to understand, can you get their intentions better? Companies who do pre-sell or do capsule launches and find ways to get initial demand from the customers.
But the problem, and you kind of alluded to this. You've got a digital planning team, a retail planning team, and neither of who's incentivized to running out of inventory. Like they're not incentivized to that. Those guys are constantly chasing like that last nit of accuracy, and that's really how they're incentivized. And like I'll tell you, if you're onto the right idea. I mean, Mr. Ferrari used to say, I want to make one fewer cars than I have orders for. And you get the idea. Like you want to leave people basically wanting more. And you mentioned jobbers also. And look, that's a whole industry. But that's where your margin goes. If you're a retailer, that is where your margin goes to die. I mean, you just set it on fire there.
And also that's where you can also unwittingly incent customers to wait for the first markdown or second markdown if they know you constantly have excess inventory, so not getting your best sell-through at regular price, which you ideally want. And the other challenge, and this challenge will continue to be there, but some of this machine learning and the deep learning can maybe help us get a better sense on the size scales and opening up to our open stock versus having to order things in case packs, et cetera. That's still one of the challenges. And to your point, advising and lining up what people are reviewed on and what we want them, how we want them to behave. The idea I've heard before is called, expect what you inspect. At one point, if the buyers and planners aren't aligned on the same thing, say the buyers are plan on sales, gross margin, and the planners are incented on sales and turn, you've got an inherent conflict there, because the buyers are going to want more merchandise, the planners are going to want less. So if you get them all three all on the same page, and you're making sure your alignment's in what you want to do as a company, and then you make those collective decisions. Many times the planning and finance team can be seen as the no people, and we're not the no people. We are the people who are going to help you optimize and to successfully do what you want to do. We can't tell you what to buy.
Basically, is what you're saying.
We're empowering their brilliance by understanding some things are going to be are going to be loss leaders, which ones are going to be the replenishable ones, and how do we optimize that given their input and their forecast as to what they think the assortment should be, but also challenging back and saying, are these duplicative? Are we giving the customers too many choices? Or are we cannibalizing ourselves? Many times what can happen, it used to happen, is you've got separate buyers buying different merchandise, and they're different categories technically in the store or on the website, but the customer has the same end use for them. So we may wind up cannibalizing ourselves and not realizing it.
Yeah.
Customer doesn't care.
She doesn't care that, Mary is buying the swimwear, but Frank is buying, I don't know, the beach bags. And those are completely separate departments, and the delivery times and whatever. No, I'm going on vacation. I want a swimsuit and I want a beach bag. And I don't care if one's back. I want them. Customers don't it's amazing. You sit inside these big organizations, and it's incredible. I'll give you the analogy. Umpires, right? Baseball. Very few people, I'm sure they exist, but very few people go to a Yankees game to watch the umpire the game. They're going to see Judge hit a 900 foot. That's what they're going to see. Okay? Nobody's going to cheer if an ump got a close call, whatever. Yeah, I got to do that. So, like, you lose sight of the fact, look, the consumer, they want to see Judge get the home run. They just want what they want. And there's some brands out there, a lot of brands out there that are going, we're going to service that need. And you've got some of these, dinosaur type companies, you know who they are, that they're just so wrapped around the flagpole. They're just getting smoked in the marketplace. And you look at like market caps of some of these companies that are just, and other ones, they're just off to the races.
Yes.
It's amazing. And they're in the same industries, by the way. It's incredible.
I mean, customers have so much more choice literally at their fingertips now in their smartphone than they ever did. It used to be that, we had these, what you call these bastions of fashion where people had to go there because that's where the merchandise was. Now it's anywhere, anytime commerce, and you can get it anywhere. And if you don't satisfy me in terms of having that swimsuit and that beach bag available simultaneously, I'll find somebody else who will, or I'll get it from two separate retailers. And I'm not coming back to you. However, if you do satisfy me, and I see that you are being thoughtful about that, I'm going to increase my loyalty to you and tell those people about the good experience I had with you. And that's where, the idea, you and I've talked about silos before, and the expression, silos belong on farms, not in your business. We have these functional silos, but the only one that matters is the view of the customer. The only view of the organization that matters is the view of the customer. How we do it internally, they don't care how that's done. They just want to know that their needs are being met. So that's where that communication and that coordination can be challenging, even, because many at times as a retailer, you have different customers. You could have a Gen Z customer, you could have a boomer customer. You can't speak to them the same way. So how do you create that personalization and understand what their needs are and be flexible? I mean, if you try to be everything to everyone, you'll be nothing to no one. That expression has come out before, but we can still probably be better in understanding and meeting the needs of the customers in better ways. And that's always an opportunity. Customers who see companies doing that are going to reflect that loyalty back to them. I think during the pandemic, McKinsey said 75% of customers changed product or brand by necessity, which wasn't surprising, a little scary, but what was really scary to retailers, I think their follow-up statistic was when those products became available again, 67% didn't go back to the original product. They were just as happy with their replacement product. They'd established a new pattern, a new inertia, a new baseline. So that customer loyalty, and Steve Dennis talked about it in one of his remarkable retail books, it was like in the Captain Phillips movie where the customer says, well, I'm the captain now. I've got to satisfy my needs. I'm not going to just do what you tell me. You've got to figure out ways to satisfy me. And that's what smart brands are really doing, is understanding that the customer is in charge, and we are there to address, as Clayton Christensen called, their jobs to be done. What problem do they need us to solve for them?
It's so true. I mean, look, you've set up some really cool measurement frameworks and performance frameworks and all that. Myself, I study these things, intently, gotten to really kind of a point where in so many use cases, all of the individual metrics are really, really important. Ever since, I don't know what summer of like 21, I think, you had Zuckerberg and Cook really going at it between Meta and Apple, the capacity of signals loss and all this and that. I really kind of retrenched back to an old school ad to sales ratio for a lot of things. I get really, really deep into some of the stuff to see kind of which way the wind's blowing on certain channels. But, talk a little, if you could, about, and this is art and science, right? Like,
Yes.
the detail of all of this is crucially important, but the big picture is just still the most important thing.
Exactly. And I think it's hard to measure. I mean, as quaint as it sounds, it's still kind of true to a certain extent. What John Wanamaker said almost 100 years ago, where he said, I'm wasting half my ad money. The problem is I just don't know which half. Well, with digital attribution, we're getting better on that, but we don't know where is the first point of contact. And the purchase funnel and the journey has gotten so fragmented that's really hard to identify what ad dollar affected what ad dollar maybe just raised awareness, what other outreach maybe spurred action, what one closed the deal. Same thing, trying to attribute e-commerce volume versus in-store volume. When you buy something online, but it's fulfilled in store, buy online, pick up in store, or it's bought online, returned in store, looking at a trade area volume, how do you want to define your metrics? And I think that comes down to what action do you want to take differently? What information will inform your actions, and what process in the purchase funnel, what are those ad activities influencing? And it's very hard to attribute them.
Do you see clean rooms helping or hurting, or they're neutral on this?
Well, I think clean rooms help because it kind of gets the data in a more standardized format, and you could have someone looking at the whole subset of data. But it's unless you adopt change your processes of how you're defining that and what does success look like. I mean, it definitely helps from cleaning the data and maybe getting some comparative metrics anonymously some way, the same way that some of these marketplace providers or like a Shopify or somebody else or an aggregator on like a buy now pay later platform like Klarna can anonymize feedback from different customers. A clean room could have the opportunity to give you some anonymous feedback about companies like yours, so it could give you directional information.
You know, it's funny. Google is still in the process of, I think they walked it back. We're not getting rid of cookies now. Cookies are here.
Yeah, I saw that third-party cookie is not crumbling.
Exactly. And like, they can't, as badly as they want to get away from that, and I believe they do, they can't fully get away from that. But at the same time, I think would it open the door to, to clean rooms to say, look,
Mhm.
eventually this is going to go away, right?
Yes.
And, where marketing dollars are becoming more precious and finite, if you're able to prove efficacy of a marketing dollar digitally rather than just, I don't know, streaming radio, podcasting, whatever, billboard, if you're able to prove efficacy of that dollar digitally out at retail, that's kind of like the big win, the big unlock. But tough stuff.
Absolutely.
And the hardest part though is internally, in your building to get people to sort of let go of some of these long-held beliefs that no, I've been advertising on XYZ radio station since, since there was radio, right? And like,
Yes.
I'm not going to stop.
Well, that's why A/B testing is so important. The same thing you do on a digital website, A/B testing for marketing. And to your point, like the multi-touch attribution, we know how are you doing it? What you really did in that case is set up a hypothesis. The hypothesis, then you tested it. Hypothesis, if I run advertising on this platform at this time, I'm going to drive this result. So then you can test that hypothesis. And what big data and AI is very good for is looking at correlation. You can't necessarily tell a causation, but you can see the correlation. So if you want to see, are these things correlating, you can set up those cases and then have these metrics and have these dashboards that show you like the degree of correlation. And you can look at it within different standard deviations, what's your confidence level that it actually did influence it, et cetera. And I'm looking up here, I'm looking at a quote I saw something from Salesforce. It said, 94% of brands consider synthesizing customer data across channels a high priority, yet only a minor have effective systems, to your point. Those with unified data report 46% higher customer lifetime value. This is 2024. They said that, omnichannel investment pays off. Getting CLV up 46% is tangible and measurable. And it's not about having data, it's about using it. Real-time decisions across buy, browse, and loyalty. So it's not just having the data, but to your point, how can I use that to prove or influence a hypothesis that's going to influence me to take different action?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a deep interest in consumer behavior and analytics,
Yes.
and marrying that with the practical part, the operational part of conversion optimization, personalization, and CX. I wonder if you could just spend a minute, and if you could tie this back to what you're saying about CACs are higher than ever, and selling into just a second or third item or possibly adjacencies. I just wondered if you
Yes.
could talk about, like, all right, you have the customer, the importance of not breaking them and not screwing it up. And and that's a human element, right? That's not something that AI can really sort of even really touch at the moment.
Where you once you have the customer and you're engaged in a conversation with them, you're not pushing the sale, but you're informing them and trying to help satisfy their needs. The toughest thing is to get into that buy mentality, to get to that commitment from browse to buy. Once somebody is in that buy mentality, adding another item to the basket doesn't seem like another huge decision. I've already decided to buy. This is a great deal. I can't pass it up. Or this is a great compliment to what I bought. So the first thing you want to do is establish that rapport with them, that you're there to satisfy their needs. Get in that mentality and say, I trust this retailer to satisfy the need I have. And now, oh, look at these other great things. It's that behavioral psychology of, the activation. Once you have that activation, I want to buy, then you want to be satisfied with the whole experience. It's not enough then. You've got to buy it. And if it's online, how is it delivered? How is the pricing? How is the promotion? How is everything handled along the whole journey? If you have a question about it, how is the customer service? So there are many ways that it can fizzle at any point along that chain. They could decide to buy something, they could have a problem with the checkout process, a problem with a credit card, a problem with something else. So how do you make that entire journey as seamless as possible? Because the last thing you want to do is squander that buy decision or that buy impulse through some other way. So that thought of, okay, I'm in the mindset to buy. Now, okay, I've got that golden opportunity, and how do I deliver that to the finish line?
Yeah. How do you think about sort of coaching and building teams into that? Because it's not simple. I mean, you've got a lot of,
Oh,
to
it's
your
not
point,
simple.
silos, and you've got, how do you get somebody that's building your email program to sort of like marry up with somebody's running your Amazon agency relationship, like, because all these things are connected, but like if
Yes.
there's not like a glue within the organization, they'll all do their own thing, like awesome. Like the email person will do their own thing
Hmm.
great, and the Amazon agency guy will do his thing great. But if there's not like cohesion, the
Hmm.
customer can tell. Like if there's not like this through line through the whole thing.
That's a great point. And a friend of mine brought up a great term for that, and she called it the connective tissue between the parts of the organization. So you
Yes.
have that throughput, that connective tissue. And no, the best teams don't just know the numbers, don't just know the tasks. They know why they're doing it, what the ultimate responsibility is, and how it will affect other people's functions within their group. And that's part of breaking down those silos and getting more on that, whether it's the matrix or the cross reporting. But it's really understanding how what I do affects other areas of the company. And whether it's dotted lines, et cetera, or just raised awareness, it's always a challenge. But I think as long as, I mean, Amazon is relentlessly customer focused. So as Nordstrom. If you look back at a historic department store, they were empowering their sales associates to do what they needed to do to close the sale. Amazon is trying to remove all barriers. So how do we, as other retailers, look at that? How do we, appropriately remove as many barriers as we can and increase that collaboration, that connective tissue? So we're communicating to the customer in an authentic, compelling way that says they've got their act together. So it's not just doing the tasks, it's knowing why we're doing the tasks and having a feeling that we're each part of the organization and knowing, maybe just being more informed about how the task we're doing is affecting things upstream, downstream, to the side, et cetera. So we're not just doing something in our own little bubble or silo. And that can be a very important just from an awareness point of view. And then ask for, encourage, and accept feedback. That's something that sometimes people hesitate to bring up feedback. They don't want to be the naysayer. They don't want to be the troublemaker. But odds are, I found I've tell people, if you have a question, ask it. The only stupid question is the one that's not asked. Because if you have the question, odds are somebody else has it. And the only way we're going to learn is by bringing up those questions and looking at it through different people's points of view. So please ask that question, and maybe it'll prompt us to think differently about how we do things. Like Apple and Steve Jobs said, think different.
Yeah. I'll tell you, you said something really interesting, and I'm not suggesting that you get, person building your email campaigns, you give him or her your whole P&L. I'm not suggesting you do that. But, what I've always done, and I think you've done this too, is, what, the person building your emails, I've always thought if I was in that seat doing that all day long, I kind of want to know how that email program did.
Yes.
Did it sell anything? Did it like move the business forward?
Hmm.
And I don't know. It's shocking how many of like that sort of like level of folks I've given, as much transparency as like I can share with them, and B, that they're kind of going to be interested in. They're not going to be interested in, really arcane stuff. They don't want to know that. But like, hey, this moved the needle. And then once they get it, like you could say, oh, did you know if you did this 10 more times this effectively, we can all have summer houses. Like, did you know
Hmm.
that? And then they get really like into it. Like they want to just keep it moving. And it sounds like
Yes.
you do sort of the same thing.
Yeah, that they feel connected to the outcome, and that they can also say, okay, without any feedback measures, you're just going to keep doing the same thing again and again, unless someone tells you this one worked, this one didn't really. And then in your own mind, you can say, well, what are the commonalities? What are the differences? And your intuition can kind of work on it in the background. And as you get more feedback, you can have new ways of looking at that and really be more informed. And then getting that feedback, I think, makes people feel more a part of the organization, not just a cog in the wheel, but more about delivering. What did you do? You delivered that message to the customer customer. They reacted. They liked what you had to say. They engaged with it. And that's a positive feeling, because think, as long as we've been in the business, you always have the Gartner engagement index of how engaged people are in their jobs. It's usually been pretty low. By giving that feedback and making people feel more attached to the customer and that they're part of the delivering the solution, and their target appreciated that, I think that's a positive free reinforcement that can really pay dividends.
What are you seeing out there in terms of brand.coms? And the way I look at this, a brand.com, has always been part cash register and then part temple of the brand. And I think, years ago when we first got into this, they were probably making this up, 90% cash register, 10% sort of temple of the brand, where the brand could say, here's why we're different, better, ethos, what we stand for, all these things. I think today, at least what I'm seeing, I'm curious what you're seeing out there, in the marketplace, seeing that almost flipped. I'm hearing actually of brand websites that are seriously considering pulling the plug on the commercial component of the brand website, because the operational capabilities and the operational excellence that they need to realize to compete with Amazon is just, it's basically beyond them. And some of them clearly, they grew up, they're digitally native, .coms,
Yes.
see startups and whatever. And so they're awesome at this. So that's not to say
Yes.
that they're even talking about this, but I am hearing that some legacy older brands that, by the way, they have a website that they sell on, they're talking about, I think we're going to wind that back and just be total experiential and gathering, that's a place to do zero party data, first party data,
Okay.
use that, and then to go sort of mechanize that out into the rest of the marketplaces.
The danger with that first comes to mind is you are outsourcing your customer relationship to the marketplaces, and they're owning your data, who's shopping there. So you're raising the awareness. They're reaping the benefit then of the customer going there, finding it based on price, and you're getting a cut of that. So what you maybe the opposite of that would be to use the marketplaces to introduce new concepts or a diffusion part of your line, but then bring them to your website to upsell them, to establish a relationship, to build a loyalty program, etc. And I think that's a both and, not an either or. I think saying we're just going to have the brand front page, so we can be basically you're paying then for Amazon or other marketplaces advertising. Basically, you're doing advertising for them and driving it to them. So the challenge is not do we work with Amazon, it's how do we work with Amazon, and who owns the data. If you have loyalty programs and other things that you can do, and social interaction with emailing this outfit to your friends, social shopping, things like that, I think there's a coexistence with Amazon in a way, in terms of what do they do for you, what do you do for them, and it's not an easy balancing act. I'd be cautious, just my first reaction of saying we're going to close down our e-commerce website and do everything through Amazon, because still the same thing with returns and fulfilled by Amazon and the costs and everything else. What's your margin, et cetera. I'd be more in opening up an omni-channel brand, opening up physical stores to interact with and engage the customer.
If you're a consumable brand though, right? And here, this is kind of the category I'm talking about. You're a consumable brand.
Okay.
Where if you need a consumable, you need it now. You're not ordering, I'm making this up entirely. If you're ordering toothpaste, chances are if you're making this with the two and, you're doing whatever. And so you need the toothpaste now. What I'm hearing though, is that a lot of the folks in that category where it's a high velocity, fast moving consumer goods.
Yes.
They are capable of hitting operational efficiencies and operational excellence like Amazon. They're theoretically capable of that. But what I think they're realizing is that the execution of that and the actual human capital, the investment in human capital of ladies and gentlemen who have actually done this a couple, 3 times before, not just hiring, somebody, that can fog a mirror and, it's all theory to them. No, this is really, really messy stuff to go build an awesome operational experience. And you better have gotten a lot of bruises on you and a lot of black and blues all over your body, that you've taken that with you and say, now I know how to go do this flawlessly, because you don't get a second swing at that. You really don't. And anyway, these are the sort I'm not talking about apparel. People will wait. I'm generalizing. They'll wait for new shoes, because guess what?
Sure.
They already have 20 pairs of shoes. Like they don't need a new pair in most cases, but they need their toothpaste because otherwise, they're going to get made fun of. And so like, this is kind of, what I'm hearing out there.
And they probably have it set up on their Amazon Subscribe and Save, so they get a 5 to 15% discount and get it delivered at an interval. So, but there's also multiple marketplaces too, where they're using, Target, using Walmart, using Amazon. You're probably going to diversify because find ways to do that. And then how do you consolidate all your data from these different marketplaces together? That can become a challenge.
That's tough stuff. And by the way, I can almost promise you all those various marketplaces, the smarter folks running this will have, and they'll say, what's my North Star? So like, what were my sales, right? Well, there's, as you know, there's 20 ways to calculate. Was it retail sell through? Was it cost shipments in? Was it net? Is it gross? There's like a million ways to calculate that. So like, even if you have sharp people running, okay, here's my North Star. I can promise you the North Star, the way they calculate the North Star across all those various marketplaces is like radically different. So like you can say, I want my smash net bottom line sell through after returns, whatever. This is my selling value. You're going to have a very different calculus the way all of these different marketplaces report it to you. It just is. So like, this is really, really tricky stuff to sort of knit all of these things together.
I'm wondering maybe that's where the clean room concept can come up. If you can get all your data into a clean room from the different marketplaces and standardize it in some ways to get you at least directional insights. One more thing I'd like to touch on before we wrap up. We got into the analytics, the data science, and bringing new systems in. The other thing I'd like to advocate for is to make more and more of the people in the companies, if you will, call them like citizen data scientists. People who are, like I say, I'm fluent in retail. Citizen data. That's a term I've heard before. In other words, you're not a formal data scientist, but you know the business. You know how to use the data from the data scientists are giving you. So more informed and comfortable with the technology. The way I say that I'm fluent in retail, conversant in technology, I think the more that we can relate all these analytics that we have and all this data we have, and I think there's a big difference between data and information. Data is all the underlying metrics. Information is something you can take action on. So how do you make people within the organization in each function more comfortable using data, understanding what's available, and getting maybe prepackaged data? They're not going to be writing code. They're not going to be doing the deep data analysis. However, if you can have what I've read in some books called like data solutions that the data scientists create. And I had one of these when I worked at Bloomingdale's before. We used an IBM Cognos system that we took a lot of the key elements that people would need and put it into a system where they could select what elements they wanted, what time frame, and the report would be generated automatically for them on Sunday night. So when they came in on Monday, it would be there. So making more people conversant in the technology and comfortable with it to use it in their roles in a more way without thinking there has to be a divide between church and state, between business and technology. How do you create those bridges that I talk about building between the needs of the business and the capabilities of technology solutions, and finding a way to make the data for these startup tests or these inroads more accessible to more people, so they can, we talk about flip that pyramid on its head. If almost everyone's engaging in repetitive tasks, how can we use some of this AI and ML to automate the repetitive tasks, but dig more deeply into the exceptions and then surface those exceptions for these talented people who've got a lot of experience and intuition? AI is great at narrow, deep, and repetitive looking back. People are better at context, looking forward, and extrapolating and brainstorming. How can we provide them that fuel that they can then use their talents and apply it to really help drive the organization forward in better connecting with the customer?
So you're deputizing people, is basically what you're doing.
Yeah, empowering. I'd say empowering them. But the analogy I'd use is almost like a paramedic or someone who's doing triage. You're taking the vital signs, the reports of the vital signs of the business. What are they indicating? What action do you need to take? And maybe developing that more robustly.
Yes. All right, my friend, this has been a blast. So grateful.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Be in touch soon.
Take care. Have a great day.